Next, we'll go to our public comments. How many minutes, Ms.? 2.5. What's that? We'll have 2.5 minutes. We want to invite first up Neil Ricard, and I apologize early if I get these names wrong, but correct me though, please. And then on deck is Lori Spruance. Okay. Okay.
All right. My name is Neil Rickard from Utahns Against Hunger. I'm the child nutrition advocate there. Utahns Against Hunger would just like to commend the Child Nutrition Department, along with the efforts of principals, teachers, food service personnel, and all the staff who actually been working to implement these alternative service breakfast models up to this point. As we saw in the video, it is an undertaking. They've put a lot of work in, and it's important because hunger is insidious in that it can sap the focus of a student and erode their potential. We saw these teachers talking about how critical breakfast is as a source of attention, cognitive benefits. Breakfast is key to concentration, retaining information as students go through their school day. Access to breakfast makes sure that the students have actually the focus that's necessary for math, reading comprehension, and any subject where students are being challenged to actually exceed their previous capacities. That effort is, it relies on actually having the energy you need from breakfast. And not only that, these alternative service models, as we've seen in some of the videos, create an environment that's conducive to learning, an environment with fewer behavioral incidents, and also an environment where students are creating healthy habits. Breakfast in the classroom is an opportunity for students to share a wider variety of foods, and it's also an opportunity to actually identify necessary food groups, especially when, as some schools do, it's incorporated into features of learning. Students who receive breakfast in the classroom have actually been shown to be at less risk for obesity and being overweight than students who don't. Alternative breakfast models like breakfast in the classroom, breakfast after the bell, grab and go, all remove barriers from students and from families who otherwise would be participating in school breakfast. And that's essential to creating these communities for students, whether it's a student who's walking to school somewhere in a Granite School District or riding a long bus ride to get to breakfast somewhere in San Juan County. We hope in Utahns Against Hunger to see a lot of these barriers fall for students in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Lori Spruance. One of the two. I think I might be close.
Well researched.
Good morning, board. My name is Lori Spruance. Good job. I'm a researcher at Brigham Young University with specific expertise in school lunch and school breakfast programs, and I'm here to express my support for school breakfast as well. The research, as mentioned, strongly supports the benefits of school breakfast, and the benefits for serving them after the bell are also extensive, including a modest improvement in test scores, which I think is important to note because one thing that we hear a lot is that teachers are concerned about the classroom time that is taken when breakfast is served after the bell. But there's no difference in test scores and slight improvements in test scores for students who participate in these models, in addition to the other documented benefits for behavior, attendance rates, and other outcomes. I believe at very least the board should consider supporting a policy or rule for the turnaround schools to serve breakfast after the bell. Thank you.
Thank you. Marie Walker, and then Susie Blackham.
Good morning, board. I'm thankful that you were able to give me a few minutes to talk today. I'm a parent. I live in Wasatch County. I'm a parent of 2 children who are blind. Kel is 20 now and is at Utah State University, doing really well, and Mia is 12. And her placement is in my district in Heber. I am here to express my concerns about the current proposals being made by Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind. I am concerned about current policy and proposed budget that they are requesting. So Mia, my child who's 12, has always had appropriate services. She was reading Braille at 4 and has always been on level or above level with her sighted peers educationally. Because my district has chosen to opt out of services from USDB, her technology, the TVI services, and some of her materials, Braille materials, are provided by the LEA, Wasatch School District. Her orientation and mobility specialist, which is cane instruction, so the long white canes you see, is provided by USDB. My son, however, Kel, was in the system under the exact model that USDB is proposing with our policy changes, which is mainstream classroom and TVI services provided by USDB. He has the same condition as my daughter, who was reading Braille at 4, but he was not reading Braille until he was 8 years old. I believe that was because of placement. He came to grade level as soon as he received appropriate services, namely Braille instruction for 1 hour a day in a mainstream setting, and he never had any discipline problems after he came back to our schools. So you may argue that things have changed. That may be true, but then why are we changing them back? I have listened to many of the bills being presented to the Education House Committee this year, and I believe that they believe the same as I do, that education is better managed locally than at a state level. This is why I am confused as to why we are going back to USDB, managing TVIs from a state level. When I received a copy of the petition where shareholders were asked to be heard, I immediately reached out to my community and my family, asking them to sign the petition. I also reached out nationally to Advocates for the Blind. Our community loves my kids, and many signed the petition. And they loved the experience that they had with watching Kel be on the high school swim team. And they loved Mia being in plays and singing with One Voice Children's Choir. And they have ownership in that because they live where we live. And they all are very proud. So that generated 100 signatures and a lot of attention. And so I was contacted by the superintendent of USDB and told that I was misinformed. And I got to tell you, I find it a bit insulting that I and other parents of the visually impaired are treated like that there's an attitude that we are not educated and not informed. Last year at a public parents meeting on the Salt Lake campus, one of the ECC presenters informed the parents that we are the biggest liability in a blind kid's life in the state of Utah, completely discounting our contribution to our kids' success. In the same meeting, TVIs, that is educators that are over Braille instruction, and O&M specialists, the cane use, were also disparaged. For this reason and others, I don't participate in a lot of on-campus activities. I ask you, if we are misinformed, my time's up, whose fault is that? I have been weeks researching information provided to parents, sorting through and trying to determine what exactly has been going on. And this is what I've discovered. Hopefully, can I just point out 3 more things? Is that okay? I'm out of time, but.
I'll give you another minute
Okay.
to wrap it up.
So the first policy change that I'm concerned about is that they can make changes to their code, their policy, without the approval of the advisory council. So the advisory council has been, the teeth has been taken out of that. There are no longer any parents serving on that board, and there are only 2 people representing the visual side of things. And they are not required to get approval from that board, only to approve any policy changes. And they also, I'm concerned about educators of the visually impaired are concerned about policy changes on both sides, district employees and USDB employees. And I think you'll hear from them today, so I'll let them represent what they are concerned about. The 3 changes I'm concerned about is the 3% rule being promoted to districts, offering services free of charge. That is false. Those services are not free. They're not free to the state education fund. USDB does not offer free services. They either bill districts or they bill the state education fund, but obviously the services aren't free. And the second change is that USDB policy has recently been changed to allow LEAs to be billed for O&M services. That was a service that was previously offered by USDB, but they're still asking for $1.7 million to cover charges. So I urge you to please examine USDB policy and make corrections necessary to return control and management of VI kids to their local educators and to ensure accountability and transparency. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Louise, thank you. Let's see, Louise Molding? Is that right?
You said Susie Black.
There's Susie.
What's that?
Susie Blackham is next.
Oh, Susie. Oh, okay, got it. My bad.
No problem. Okay, so my time's starting. I got my,
There you go.
all right.
You're on.
Okay, gotcha, thank you. My name is Susie Blackham. I am a teacher of the visually impaired. This is my 11th year in this position, and it is literally the best job in the world. I love my job so much. I am a resident of Salt Lake City in the Rose Park neighborhood, and I have recently formed a coalition of educators for the blind and visually impaired, as also supported by parents. This coalition is not based on who your employer is, it's based on educators who are highly trained and who are unified in approaching the needs of our students with visual impairments in Utah. My coalition is called, it's very long, Unified Utah for the Education of Blind and Visually Impaired Students. You can also just call it Unified Utah or Unified Utah BVI. Blind Visually Impaired is an acronym we use a lot. The purpose, our mission of this coalition is to advocate for the needs of blind visually impaired students by communicating directly with you, the state board, and as well as local education authorities in the LEAs. Generally, we feel that regular and charter public schools are able to effectively function within the basic education policy framework. Special education requires more detailed framework to ensure the needs of all students. Educating blind visually impaired students appropriately and effectively requires even more specific and detailed framework within which to function. By the time policy and lawmakers get to the level of specificity, they need appropriate stakeholder input. UUBVI, which are the initials of my coalition, was created to help fill the need for stakeholder input on educational policy specific to Utah's blind and visually impaired students. Our purpose is simply to provide you and the local education authorities unbiased feedback that just is directly affecting the policies and the way our employment functions and the way that we're able to serve our students in the local areas. What I have for you today is I've made a little note card for each of you I was comparing maps, so this may not be 100% accurate. I was up late last night trying to find lists and couldn't find them. There's one card for each of you. It has our social media accounts because that's where most of our information is. And on the back, it has the school districts that I believe are in your district, the LEAs, and I've listed the names of individual educators so that you can understand these are affecting people and students. Thank you so much for your time. I'll just ask if you can just pass these around and take the one that belongs to you.
If you'd hand them to Board Member Belknap, that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Louise Molding.
Good morning. Chair Huntsman and Superintendent Dixon walked away, board members, colleagues, and quite frankly, my friends. A lot of them here today. Back in 2002, I occupied the office in that corner as the assessment director, and I was here mainly to develop the policy for AYP under No Child Left Behind. And at that time, I thought, wanted, desired that we could implement a policy that was sort of a one-size-fits-all in terms of the tests that were given to students, et cetera. The state of Utah already had an accountability measure in place. We had UPass. We were testing students at every grade. We were publicly reporting. And yet, because of No Child Left Behind, we couldn't use a system that was already in place. We had to then develop new policy. At the time, what kept me awake at night was if a political policy was going to undermine quality educational practice, because accountability is a policy, not an educational practice. And so now I find myself feeling the very same way. The developments in teacher preparation over the last several years changed such that instead of having the university systems in which they're all nationally accredited, now every LEA and charter is able to be or will soon be a teacher preparation program. And so that necessitates standardization, testing, reporting, and it feels like No Child Left Behind all over again, in which we're undermining quality. I don't think No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top or Every Student Succeeds is improving the quality of education. And I'm not sure that diffusing teacher preparation from 7 public schools and our privates to every LEA is going to improve the quality of teaching and instruction. Thank you.
Thank you. Vincent Bates.
Good morning, Chair Huntsman and members of the board. I should say hello again. My name is Vincent Bates. I'm a parent and a lifelong Utah music and art teacher and teacher educator. My short sermon today is in the form of a short story. I hope the symbolism will be clear relative to my previous comments pertaining to USBE, standardized performance assessments, and the outsourcing of Utah's teacher education programs. Once there was a young farmer and his wife. The farmer came home after a long day in the fields and sat down at the table for dinner. But there wasn't any dinner. He called to his wife, "Wife, where's my dinner?" She came into the room wiping her hands on her apron, apologizing. "I'm sorry, husband. You wouldn't believe the day I've had. Give me half an hour, and I'll prepare a nice meal for you." Being the understanding husband that he was, the farmer said, "That's okay, wife. I can wait a little longer. I'm a patient man, but you know, if there's one thing I've learned from farming, it's efficiency. If I had a day here in the house doing your job, I could streamline a lot of things. I'll bet you that I could do your job more efficiently." His wife replied, "Oh, really? I'll take that bet. We can trade places tomorrow." To make a short story shorter, the next morning the wife went to the fields and the farmer did the housework. His day was one disaster after another. He hadn't realized how much there was to do, and frankly, he lacked the expertise to do it well. As dinner time drew near, he realized he didn't have anything to feed his wife when she came home. So in a final act of desperation, he ran down to Little Caesars and bought a hot and ready pepperoni pizza and some soda pop. Yes, it was a poor substitute for a homemade meal, but it was food, technically, valid and reliable. The wife came home, sat down at the dinner table, and asked her husband, "Husband, is this all there is for dinner?" The husband hung his head and said, "I'm sorry. I had no idea what it takes to do the housework. I've made a real mess of things. From now on, I promise that I will trust you to do your job, and I'll stick with mine." And that's exactly what he did. Thank you.
Next, we'll have Marla Palmer.
Thank you so much for the time to be able to address you. My name is Marla Palmer. I am the parent of 2 blind children. They attended Legacy Preparatory Academy in Woods Cross, graduated from Woods Cross High, are now attending Salt Lake Community College and BYU. So they are out of the system. So why am I here? I have in the past served on USDB's advisory council, and for the past 20 years have been advocate for blind parents of blind children. So I'm here today just to present some concerns I have and some ideas that you'll hopefully take into consideration. About a month ago, I was told about the opt-out policy that was put into place, and it was presented to me by a teacher that had some concerns, a teacher that worked in a district. In theory, the rule change does allow USDB to provide services to all deaf and blind children in the state for free. But after review and speaking with teachers, there are additional barriers that should be considered. The first is when I was networking with parents and teachers through the state that had not heard about it, or they hadn't heard about it, and that concerned me, like, why aren't stakeholders, especially teachers in the district, not aware of this policy? Why didn't they have input? USDB has communicated and has assumed that teachers in the district will be okay with this transition. What I've heard is there's concern with pay, benefits, mistrust, and differences of student outcomes and expectations. There are seasoned teachers that I have heard from directly that have said that they would work with their district. If USDB were to take over their district, that they would stay in their district, not be a teacher of the visually impaired. And Mr. Coleman has said, well, that's their choice, that's okay. We can find teachers. But if you are to really study and look, there is a shortage nationwide of teacher of the visually impaired. And to have seasoned teachers say, we're not going to work and be a teacher anymore, that's highly concerning to me. Second one Mary addressed is the orientation mobility services. These have been free for all districts for many, many years. And what happens now is if a larger district that does not opt out wants those services, they either have to pay for them, which is fair, but as Joel has explained, that has been a barrier. And so rather than paying for that, they have the opportunity to opt out not only deaf but blind services. It's kind of an all or nothing approach. Why opt out all services when they just need one? And that's concerning to me, especially if things are running well in the district. I just urge you to look at outcomes, look at the barriers that are going to come up if this is implemented, if they are to get the funding on the Hill. And please, please listen to stakeholders. Belknap, you are my representative. You'll be hearing from me, but I appreciate the time. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Next, we'll have Caitlin, I think it's Bjorn or Byrne, one of the two. Bjorn. Got it? I'm not doing too bad.
Thank you. Chair Huntsman, Superintendent Dixon, and members of the board. My name is Caitlin Byrne, and I'm a university-based teacher educator. My research for the past several years has focused on the implications of standardized pedagogical performance assessments for teacher candidates, teacher education, and the teaching profession as a whole. I'm here today to share my concerns about how these assessments are at best redundant and at worst dangerous. Research, both mine and others, has shown that standardized pedagogical performance assessments that are scored by outside entities invite teacher candidates to put on a show for the scorers. Specifically, my data showed that teacher candidates deliberately engaged in bad teaching practices in order to look good in their video submissions. For example, one participant chose to ignore a high-needs student who would have required support throughout her lesson in order to demonstrate the type of whole class engagement required by EdTPA. Knowing it was bad teaching practice, the candidate acted in her own best interests in her attempt to pass EdTPA. Though assessments like EdTPA and PPAT require teacher candidates to share information about their teaching context, it is all too easy to game the assessment and perform for the scorers because the scorers are not there to question it. There is no follow-up discussion, just a rubric and a score. In contrast, the performance assessment practices already being used in college and university teaching programs involve not only video clips and written reflections, but multiple observations over time and meaningful dialogue with teacher candidates. These practices are far more authentic than submitting a portfolio of video clips and written reflections to a remote scorer with whom no dialogue can take place. So what exactly does an assessment like EdTPA, PPAT, and the like bring to the table? If we look to the research, these standardized performance assessments invite inauthentic teaching performances aimed at checking off boxes and earning a passing score, a practice made possible by removing the scoring to an outside entity who lacks firsthand knowledge of the teaching context, a dangerous practice indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes our public comment section.